So, have you ever felt that you may or may not have made the right call? Well, I'm going to tell you a short story about, my decision that I made that got me where I am today. So, a while back when I was working at my previous job in fast food, I was offered a role in management. And at the time I was going to school, I had to politely decline to my manager that I was just not ready for that. And, a lot of people were probably surprised by that. And I'm pretty sure you guys are surprised by that as well. Why didn't you, go into management? Well, to tell you the truth, the reason I didn't choose management was because that was not what I wanted to do. A lot of my friends had went into management prior to me, and they just, they would do it for a little bit and then they would back out. They would, go back to their normal rank. They would not, they would step down. They just, there was a lot of things that were going on internally that externally I didn't know what was going on because I was not involved in the day-to-day of what, they were doing other than just knowing, that I worked with them. And, it was, office politics and all that. And it just wasn't, something I was worried about. And my boss, had approached me, during my time while I was going to college and I was working on my bachelor's degree. It was one of those things that I, was like, I'm not really sure I want to do that. And yeah, the pay would have been a lot better and I'd probably be in a lot better situation today. But what I did understand was that I knew how everything worked, how the managers had to deal with the labor, when to send people home, when to cut back on the amount of people that needed to be on the shift. And then, if there was additional people that needed to be brought in or all these different things that, in running a business. And that was one of the things that I was understanding, working with the management team, working with my friends who were, higher level than me. And even being the safety guy at some point, I learned a lot of things at that job, and it carried over to my other job where I was able to handle better situations and not be under as much stress as I was previously and was able to be more calm and collective than I had been at my previous job where everything was, fast paced. You got to be back, you got to do like 4 or 5 tasks, but you're only one person. So anyway, was it worth the risk of not being a manager? And I would say yes, because being a manager they have a lot of responsibilities. Now, I'm not saying that it was a very hard job. A couple of my friends did it and, they did it for a while, but then they just said it wasn't working out. It's not what they want to do. It's not what everybody makes it out to be. And for me, going into my newer role when I worked over in a transit agency that was what I wanted to do. That's where I set my heart. And guys, to tell you the truth, that's the number one thing is you need to go where your heart is, not where people want you to go. A lot of my family knew when I was growing up that I wanted to work in transportation, and that was my goal. And I stuck to my goal because very few people that I was told ever stick to what they want to do. Now, I'm not saying this is for everybody, but just the being a manager is what I want to be, but it's not in the industry I want to be in. Working fast food is not what I want to do all my life. Some people love it. There's been people I met that have been managers there for years and they love it. My old boss, was there for a long time and is still there and, is a respectable person within the company. But me personally, I just didn't want to do it because of all the shifts that I would have had to work, all these random shifts, working from 4 p.m. to 1 a.m. and then having to come back the next day at 10 a.m. to start all over again, or working 4 nights in a row and then working a day shift. It was one of those things that I just didn't want to do. I wanted a more set schedule. I wanted to do what I actually went to school for. And that was the thing that got me going. So when I had to tell my manager, I appreciate, you bringing this up to me and offering this role to me, but I just can't take it because it's not what my heart wants. And always do what you think is right. Don't always think that, I didn't make the right call or I didn't do this or I didn't do that. No, you need to listen to yourself. Don't listen to what other people make. You can always take advice from other people. There's nothing wrong with that. You can always consult friends, family, outsiders, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, you need to make that call for yourself. Not anybody else can do it for you. And to tell you the truth, like I've already said before, was it the right call? Was the sacrifice worth it? And I'd say yes. I gained a lot of knowledge at my newer job when I left my older job in October it was actually January the following year, but I stayed on a little longer just to make a little extra money. But finally, it was getting to me where I'm working 2 separate jobs, and I just wasn't satisfied. So I ended up dropping the first job and then keeping the second job, which was what I was doing, working for a transit agency. So in all aspects of this, what I wanted to get out of this was, follow your heart. Don't always, think like, oh, was the sacrifice not worth it? Was it something that I did wrong? No. I understand that I was going to get laid off, and, I did talk to people about, I wondered if I should taken that management role, or I should moved into management. But at the same time, was I going to be happy for the next 2 years? And I wasn't sure, because I couldn't predict the future. I wouldn't know. And for a lot of you guys who are contemplating, what should I do? You just need to stick with what you know. And what I mean by that is, if you're interested in that one thing, stick with it. Don't change just because other people tell you. Now, I've seen a lot of other people on YouTube and social media say, oh, I went to school for this, but I end up doing this. Well, maybe that's a temporary thing and it's not meant for you right now. Even for me, maybe the job that I want is not meant right now. Maybe you have to wait patiently for it to happen. And to tell you the truth, it's a risk that I'm worth taking. And I know a lot of people are afraid of taking risks. And that was a risk I took, was moving on to another job that I actually wanted to be involved in. And not, I'm just going to stay here and be miserable and not happy. And to be honest with you guys, I was not happy. I was on my way out. I was ready to leave. I was just under the impression I'm just not happy. And when you're not happy, you just don't care as much. But when you are happy, you want to do as much as you can at that new job, and you want to impress everybody. You want to do all these wonderful things to get people to like you and all that. And that's fine and dandy too. But taking that risk is the biggest thing that I was happy that I accomplished. And even though I'm unemployed currently, I look back and I think, you know what? I got to do it. Not a lot of people say they got to do that. And, it's probably going to help lead me to something later on when more opportunities arise, as, things hopefully get a little bit better for, not only myself, but the rest of the people out there like yourselves who are, contemplating the same thing that I am. Are we going to get out of this? Well, eventually we will, guys. But I would just say that, take that risk, don't contemplate, think, what is it going to get me in the next 5 years? Where is it going to get me maybe next year? And a lot of that just stems from, you just need to, ask around, get opinions, but make that final decision for yourself. Don't ever let someone else dictate that. Make it on your own. So anyway, just want to leave that for a note for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this recording. It's, one that I've been wanting to do for a while. So, any suggestions or anything you have, leave it below and I'll look into it. All right, guys, have a good one. Bye.